So I'm an addict. I'm an addict who is addicted to being active. I was born in an activist family. My parents were active in community affairs. My brothers are active in community affairs. It's kind of part of my cultural DNA to want to do stuff. And it was no surprise to me when I look back at my life and I look at how I was in my 20s and 30s and what I was doing, that I was a card-carrying member of pretty much every campaigning organization I could find. I was a member of the Campaign for Nuclear Disarmament, Friends of the Earth, the World Wildlife Fund, Greenpeace, Amnesty International. I was a card-carrying member of the Labour Party, which in those days was a pretty cool thing to be. I was a shop steward and a trade union activist. I was even a member of the London Cycling Campaign. I was a member of everything I could find. If it moved, I had an opinion about it. And I would campaign for it or against it. If it didn't move, I'd join a campaign to make it move. I just wanted stuff to happen. And it felt great. It felt great. I felt really terrific. And that's what I want to deal with, because there's a kind of activism which is a bit addicted, which is a bit driven, which is a bit blind, that just wants to do something, because doing something is got to be better than doing nothing. We look at what's happening in the world and we say, wow, I'm an activist, get me out of here. Right? I need to be somewhere else. I need to do something different. And it's okay. It's okay, and it makes me feel all right. It makes me feel good. I feel like I'm useful in some kind of way. But what I want to point out today is what I'm calling a 5-step recovery program for people like me who are a bit addicted to activism. Because the activism that's based on rejection of what is now, the activism that's based on saying no to what is now, is not the kind of activism that will be really potent into the future, that will be really purposeful, that will be really mindful. And I want to build a step-by-step process towards what we might call sacred activism, or right action, or something that pays attention to our evolutionary heart that wants to make a contribution. And that's very different. That's a very different place from just, I need to do something. I don't really care what it is, I just got to be active. That's really different. So over the years, I've been blessed with several spiritual teachers, quite a lot of life experience. I hope by now I'm 57. I should have learned something. And I want to share with you the fruits of what I've learned through this 5-step recovery program. And it starts with honoring the past. It starts going all the way back. And I want to take you on a little journey. I want to invite you to go back to the beginning of the universe, because you were there. In one way, shape, or form, you were there. And if you like your metaphors a bit on the masculine side, you might say the universe began with a big bang. And if you like your metaphors more feminine, you might say creation breathed out. But one way or another, energy was set into motion. And over eons of time, energy started to cool down and coalesce into subatomic particles and atomic particles, and gravity weighed in and gave us galaxies and stars and universes, and our solar system was born, and our planet Earth manifested, and the oceans were formed, and the mountains were formed, and the forests and the trees were formed, and little by little life started to form. Initially, primitive protozoa and very primitive invertebrates, and then we see fishes and reptiles and mammals, and 200,000 years ago, only 200,000 years ago, out of this 13.8 billion year universe story, we see the rise of Homo sapiens. And we've been on a journey as Homo sapiens through this 200,000 years. What a journey we've been on. And we've wreaked a lot of havoc, and we've done a lot of good. We've gone from hunter-gatherers to tribal societies to feudal kingdoms to nation-states. We've invented forms of governance and democracy. We've more recently gone through agrarian revolutions and industrial revolutions and technological revolutions and information revolutions. And all of this brings us to today. And what a story it is. And before we move on, before we want to fix things and fade them and push them away, and before we move on, let's just honor this incredible, awesome, majestic, universal story. And that brings us to a place of being radically present to what is. Radically present to what is. And I use the word radical presence, or the phrase radical presence, because it's a presence that includes everything. It's relatively easy to be present to the nice things in life. But a radical presence means that I know about suffering not just here. I don't just know it cognitively. I feel it in my heart. I know it in my gut. I feel it in my knees, my legs, my toes. My whole being hosts somehow the global reality of what is today. And some of what is today is not pretty. A lot of what is today is not pretty. And maybe you're concerned by many different things. Maybe you're concerned about climate change and the fact that we seem to be on course for a rise in global temperatures of more than 2 degrees and the devastation that will follow from that. Maybe you're concerned about 2 billion more people living on the planet in the next few decades, and you're concerned about that. Maybe you're concerned about child sexual exploitation. Maybe you're concerned about slavery. Maybe you're concerned about rape and domestic violence. Maybe you're concerned about the thousands of people that are drowning in the Mediterranean as they flee through Libya. Or you're concerned about the civil war in Syria. Or you're concerned about 1 million refugees on the Jordanian border. Maybe you're concerned about many of these things, but are you concerned here? When you listen to the news, do you feel it here? Or do you feel it here? There's a brain in the heart, there's a brain in the gut. Do they know it too? They haven't yet discovered there's a brain in your knees, but maybe there is too. Do you feel it all the way down? Do you feel it all the way down? And can you really host a radical presence to what is? Because if we don't, we're in the, I want to push that away and just do something. But before we move, we need to be radically present to what is. We need to include it all and host this global reality in our bodies. And that takes us to a place where we need to learn to do this. We need to learn to bow down. We need to learn to bow down. We need to learn to put something other than me at the center of my life. If I've learned one thing from all of these teachers that I've been blessed with, Eileen Caddy from this place in Findhorn, Thomas Hubel, a Sufi master that I studied with, they all ask me the same question. They say, what is at the center of your life? What is at the center of your life? Is it you? Or is it something other than you? What do you bow down to? How do you cultivate humility before something greater? George Bernard Shaw described a life choice once. He said, you could choose to be a selfish little clod of ailments and grievances, complaining that the world would not devote itself to making you happy, which is a different kind of orientation. How is it? How is it? How is it if you put something other than you at the center of your life? What is at the center of your life? What is on the front of your bus? Is it you or is it something else? Because if it's you, the steps you take into the future will be partly designed to make you feel good. And that's not the point. That's not the point of sacred activism. That's not the point of right action, which are more about making a contribution, regardless of how it makes you feel. Regardless of how it makes you feel. So what is at the center of your life, and how do you know? I had the great fortune in the year 2000 to go on a pilgrimage to Mount Kailash in Tibet. And we enter through the Wesak Valley. It's a very beautiful valley, very special energetic qualities in this valley. We arrive on Sagadawa, which is the anniversary of the Buddha's birthday and death day. Happened on the same day. And the flagpole is raised and prayer flags are strung up from all over the planet, and the celebration, and then we set off to circumambulate the mountain. It takes 4 days. It's a tough walk. It's through the snow. You go over the Dol Mala, which is a pass at about 5,700 meters. It's high. It's difficult. And we did it, and we were proud of our achievement. But I was humbled by being in the presence of Tibetan Buddhists, because they don't walk around the mountain. They go around the mountain like this. They prostrate themselves fully on the earth. They mark where their fingertips reach. They walk up to that point, fully on the earth. They mark where their fingertips reach. They walk up to that point, and so on and so on and so on. It takes them months to circumambulate the mountain. Some of them go on to Lhasa in Tibet. It takes 2 years of constant prostration to get to Lhasa. And I bring them present today because they have something to teach us about bowing down, about honoring something bigger. And if you're of a spiritual inclination, it might be relatively easy, this concept of honoring something bigger, honoring God or the Creator or the Great Spirit. And if you're not, if you're more a humanist or someone on a more secular bent or even an atheist, it might be that you bow down to our collective humanity. You bow down to our collective endeavor. You bow down to moral codes that our collective wisdom have evolved over thousands of years. You need to bow down to something. You need to bow down to something. Because if you don't, you are at the center of your life. And that'll feel good on some days, bad on other days, but it won't move you out of addicted activism. It won't move you towards more sacred activism. So, we honor the past, we're radically present to what is, we learn to bow down, and we're still not ready to step. Because there's another step that we need to follow, which is cultivating stillness and listening. Stillness and listening. There are two core principles that inform all of life, stillness and movement. And before we move, we need to be still. And you need to cultivate, I need to cultivate, we need to cultivate, I would suggest, a practice of cultivating stillness. Maybe it's meditation, maybe it's running on the beach, maybe it's sitting down in front of under a tree or gazing at a sunset. It needs to be something that will cultivate the stillness from which you can deeply listen to the whisper of the future. Sometimes we listen and it comes very loud. Sometimes it's a little subtle intuition. Sometimes it's a little whisper. And we need to be very, very still to really feel it, to really sense it. Because the future doesn't just happen in the future happens in the now. The future happens right now in all the different projects, ideas, plans, possibilities that are presenting themselves to you. And maybe you hear about all sorts of different things, and you hear about new energy systems. You think that's interesting to me, or new organizational structures. You think that's interesting to me, or you hear about NGOs doing amazing work in the world. You think that's interesting to me. But what is your step? Because you can't do all of these things, but there's one that is yours. And to know what that is, we need to be still and listen. And again, not just listen here. I think I need to do this. Not even just feel it here. Not even just know with a gut instinct, but actually feel it all the way down into our toes. Listening, I call it listening with our toes, so we can really hear our call. And then, and only then, are we ready to orientate ourselves towards the future. And we're ready to take our first small steps. Start close in. Poet-philosopher David Whyte wrote a beautiful poem called Start Close In. Take the first step, not the second, not the third. Start close in. The first step, the step you don't want to take. Now, why don't you want to take it? Because if you take a step, you are committed. There is momentum, there is movement. You are out of your comfort zone. Something is shifting. And we are nervous often to take that step. But that's the step that is yours. That is the step that only you can take. The path you can see before you is not your path because somebody else has already walked it. So what is your path? What is your first little step? Start close in. Take the first step, not the second, not the third. Start close in. Take the step you don't want to take. So this is my 5-step recovery program. It looks like this. We honor the past. We're radically present to what is. We learn to bow down. We cultivate stillness and the capacity to listen, and we're ready to take a step. And I want to close by actually referring to this phrase, Activists Anonymous. And I want to turn them around into anonymous activists. Because even as activists who might be practicing something approaching sacred activism or something approaching right action, there might still be a part that wants some feedback, that wants some appreciation, acknowledgement, praise. And in most of the wisdom traditions, they say the highest form of giving is anonymous giving. Because then there's no chance you get any feedback, appreciation, and praise. And I have a little personal confession to make, because I'm a bit addicted to feedback and appreciation and praise. And I know that I'm the only one in this auditorium that suffers from this affliction. So please take this as a personal confession. But in a way, rather than to say don't have it, take it as a barometer. I've learned to take it as a barometer. Because the more I want some appreciation and praise, the more I see that I'm still at the center of my life. Because that's the part that wants it. So to the extent to which I can just give my activism freely is the extent to which I've managed to move myself out of the center of my life. And the extent to which I still need feedback, appreciation, praise, recognition is the extent to which I still need to learn to bow down. So thank you for your time. Thank you for listening. I hope this has served you.